A life sketch on Jacob Brewer. Jacob Brewer's parents, Louis and Bithynia Wheaton Brewer, made their home in Neversink, Sullivan County, New York, following their marriage. They continued residence at that place long enough for 7 children to be born. When Jacob and their third son was 10 years of age, his father's family moved by ox team to Horsehead, Chemung County, New York. This change of location proved fortunate for the family, for it afforded them the opportunity of having the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. The missionaries of the Latter-day Saints Church visited and taught them the same gospel as taught by Christ and his apostles in former days. They believed and accepted it and were baptized. At this time, Louis could scarcely read, but he had little difficulty in reading and understanding the Book of Mormon, which was presented to him by the missionaries. They continued living in this place until there were 6 children born. Jacob had little schooling, but he had become very proficient in making many of the common household utensils made of wood and used in the pioneer home. Like his father, he became a cooper by trade. In 1855, the family lived in Moodle, Steuben County, New York, where the missionaries organized a branch of the church and appointed Silas Wheaton, Bithynia's brother, to preside over the branch, which was named the Wheaton Branch. Several baptisms and blessings for members of the family were recorded while attending meetings in this branch. Jacob was baptized in 1852 by Elder R. G. Cutler and confirmed a member of the church by Elder G. Raymond in the Wheaton branch. In order to join his friend, Adam Campbell, Jacob bade farewell to his family and journeyed by boat across the Great Lakes to Michigan. On the last day of his journey, he walked about 50 miles to the place where his friend lived, near Kalamazoo. The 2 young men found work on a railroad in Canada where they worked for about a year. On their return to Michigan, they were joined by Jacob's father and his family. Louis was pleased to find such a beautiful country with an abundance of fine timber. Desiring to join with the Latter-day Saints in Utah, they made shipments, then put up and built a log house, and in 1856, the family disposed of advantages in the settled villages. While living in Michigan, 2 of Louis's children died. One was killed by a falling tree, and the other apparently died of a sickness. The family continued working in the timber for some time. They saved their money and looked forward to the time when they could join the Saints in Utah. The Brewers thoroughly enjoyed the beautiful timberland and friends in Michigan, which afforded Jacob through his life with colorful stories of his experiences. About 1857, Jacob and Adam Campbell hired out to drive freight teams, hauling provisions from the Great Lakes to Salt Lake City, Utah. Soon thereafter, Louis and family moved westward as far as Council Bluffs, Iowa. Here, Louis's brother, Anson, died and was buried at that place. After the return of the boys from the West, the family was anxious to continue their journey, but took time on January 1st, 1859, for Jacob's sister, Orpha Jane, to marry his best friend, Adam Campbell. The family reached Salt Lake during the summer of 1859. The Brewers settled in North Ogden, and Adam Campbell settled in Bountiful. Jacob was later called to make another trip to Council Bluffs to assist in the movement of the Saints. During his later life, he frequently related interesting stories of happenings while on this trip. One of his stories was of a man with sore lips who was asking what he might put on them to relieve the pain. Jacob told him to try cayenne pepper. Jacob didn't wait to find out what happened, but it is related that the man was made enough to take off the whole camp. While attending Adam's sister, who contracted typhoid fever on their journey westward, Orpha Jane took the fever and died. Before her death, she gave birth to a premature baby who died and was buried with the mother. This happened in December before they had been married a full year. Adam later married Jacob's sister, Emma. It appears that Jacob was quite shy around women, but Adam had the answer. He took Jacob to visit a cousin, Sabra Ann Follett. She was the daughter of Joseph and Cynthia Stiles Follett, who lived at Big Cottonwood, Utah. The Follett family migrated to Utah about the same time, but did not travel in the same company as the Brewer family. Sabra Ann was considerably above average in intellectual development, and through her own efforts had acquired what might be considered a good education. At least she was impressed with Jacob, and they soon became friends and talked of marriage. But Sabra Ann's mother objected, giving as her reason her daughter's lack of sufficient age to know her own mind. The daughter soon found that by contriving a secret marriage in 1864. I was the beginning of a long and happy married life. Although they were called upon to bear many sorrows and hardships to test their love and devotion, together they met joy and sorrow triumphantly. They were not blessed with many of the natural things, but they were blessed with rich spiritual blessings. They rejoiced in the great blessings of parenthood and took great joy and satisfaction in the knowledge that all the members of their family were consecrated, clean, virtuous. They loved the Lord and were willing to make any sacrifice that were necessary to serve Him that they might receive His blessings. The family home was first established in North Ogden, but when the call came from Brigham Young for saints to settle Utah's Dixie, the Brewers responded. Lewis and his sons and sons-in-law, Jacob, Charles, Joseph, Adam, and Ralph Campbell and their families, established homes on the Virgin River. Here they joined a fruitful and with an abundance of good timber in the near mountains. There was a ready market for their products. They spent most of their time during the summer months in the mountains selecting and cutting timber to be used in their shop in the long winter months. They loved the mountains best. The tall pines, the ferns, and sparkling streams held a fascination to the Brewers. They built themselves a large workshop where they lived and worked. Their father, Lewis, worked in the shop mostly, while Joseph did most of the selling and trading. In September 1868, Jacob and Ann went to Salt Lake City and received their endowments in the endowment house. Again, during the winter of 1871, Jacob, Joseph, and Adam went north with their families and worked in the timber at Big Cottonwood. This was a very cold winter, with an unusual amount of snow and ice, making logging extremely hazardous. While at Big Cottonwood, 2 families lived in one-room cabins, which were built as a fortress as protection against the Indians. Although the quarters were far from being comfortable, the families were congenial, sharing each other's joys and sorrows. Albert Joseph was born in November of 1871, and Harriet Louise was born March 13, 1872, while at Big Cottonwood. Elizabeth Campbell born to Adam and Emma at this time, and they named her Harriet Elizabeth Campbell. They all returned to Dixie during the following spring. While Suzanne's wife was called back to Salt Lake to help Bithynia, passed away, and her body was laid to rest in the Virgin City Cemetery. As the country became more settled and the saints in that area became more prosperous, it soon became apparent to Jacob and Ann that too many of the Latter-day Saints were being processed into wine, and the custom of drinking was becoming too common. They reasoned that this environment might be detrimental to the welfare of their family. Since there was a considerable migration into the land southward, the Brewers decided to join the movement. The first part of the journey was during the fall of 1878. Jacob and Charles with their families and the father, Lewis, and Grandma Ann Dalton and her children, Jemima, Marianne, Miriam, and Dave, leaving Joseph and family in Virgin City, traveled by way of the mountains north to Kanab, Utah. They built small log cabins and spent the winter in Glendale, Utah. This was an extremely cold and disagreeable winter. Many of the people suffered for lack of food since all transportation was tied up, and people had to make out with the provisions at hand. The Brewers were fortunate in having a friend named Brother Cutler who owned a grist mill near Glendale and assisted them by supplying their needs. There was a story of a family who had hung a pork on the north side of their house. Part of the pork was stolen during the night. The owner of the pork thought the Brewers might have taken the meat, but a lady neighbor said, "No, I am sure it wasn't the Brewers because I was at the Brewers' home, and all they had for breakfast was bread and bran coffee." When it turned spring, the families moved into the mountains where they worked in the timber at Season's Mill. During the fall of 1879, Jacob and Charles and their families, driving ox teams and a few extra cows, headed for Arizona. When the oxen became too worn out to pull the load, they yoked the cows which they relied upon for a good part of their food. It was characteristic of the Brewers to have plenty of milk, whether they had much to go with it or not. At Lee's Ferry, they had considerable trouble landing the cattle on the ferry boat, but in due time the journey was continued. They spent Christmas on the Little Colorado River near Joseph City, then continued on to Holbrook, arriving New Year's Day, 1880. Holbrook was quite a boomtown in those days, the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad having only recently reached that point. The Brewers first took a railroad grading contract. One day, while Charles was in town, he overheard a conversation between two men. They were discussing the need for shingles for the new settlement. Charles had the answer. The Brewers would rather work in the timber than on a railroad grade. They hurriedly disposed of their contract and moved to the timber some 60 or 70 miles south of Holbrook to what was then known as Snowflake Camp. Here they took land, laid out a town site, built a shingle mill, later a sawmill, and manufactured all manner of woodwork which was sold throughout the area during the next 20 years. Jacob and Charles built themselves comfortable homes close to each other, and a few years later, when Joseph moved to Arizona, they divided their land with him, and he built nearby. Joseph soon passed away, and his wife, Betsy, married Joseph Smith McNee. They seemed to enjoy each other's companionship and found it to their advantage to work in a partnership. During the first few years after settling, the Indians gave some trouble. The conditions looked too threatening. They hustled the women folks and children out to the adjoining communities, and the men continued working at their assigned tasks. During their spare time, they did some dry farming, which never was very profitable. Soon following settlement at Snowflake Camp, the church authorities from Snowflake organized then into a branch and named the community Pinedale. Most of the settlers were Latter-day Saints, which created a good environment in which to rear their families. With the passing time, Uncle Jake and Aunt Ann, as they were affectionately known, came to be pretty important people, not only in Pinedale, but throughout that part of the country. Aunt Ann did practical nursing. Scarcely anyone would think of having a baby without her assistance. Sorrow came to their home with the loss of their third son, Charles Frederick, who, with his two small sisters, Emma Ann and Cynthia Jane, died with diphtheria. Adam went to work somewhere and contracted diphtheria and came home sick. He had a light case, but the two little sisters and Janice Beat's little girl died. Charles Frederick, Fred, went to see about their graves at Taylor, but found no one to dig them, so he dug their graves. When he got home, his throat was all swollen, and he, too, soon died of the dreadful disease. This all happened within a week. Such trials, when borne gracefully, require strength of character and a deep abiding faith in the mercies of justice of God. With strength from the Lord coupled with that of their loved ones and friends, they were able to bear their grief. Their lives were too filled with deeds of kindness to others to be troubled for long with their own burdens. Uncle Jake was constantly in demand in assisting in the administration to the sick. The Lord blessed him with the gift of healing, which was accompanied with a strong faith in the divinity of the Lord Jesus Christ. One incident to show his faith: a Sister Shumway was very ill with pneumonia. Aunt Ann recognized her condition and sent for Uncle Jake. It appears that her spirit had left her body, for she recalled having visited on the other side and had seen many wonderful things which she was not permitted to relate. But immediately following the administration, her spirit returned to her body, and she soon completely recovered and continued a joyous and comfort to her family for many years. Uncle Jake was a very humble and prayerful man in the holy priesthood, which he honorably throughout his life. Due to a falling health, rheumatism, and a bad heart, the doctor advised that he make a change of residence to a lower altitude. After much deliberation, Jacob and Charles, with their immediate children, including Ing Hattie and her children, decided to move to the Gila Valley, arriving in Thatcher on New Year's, 1900. Here they found living conditions difficult due to a long, severe drought. Charles soon returned to Pinedale, but Jacob filed on a small tract of land about 8 miles south of Safford, near a small settlement which was later named Lebanon. Later, Jacob's second son, Joseph, moved his family from Pinedale, and he and Albert filed on land next to their father's homestead. An artesian well was drilled, which afforded sufficient irrigation for a small acreage, and they were able to produce sufficient crops to supply their modest needs with the assistance given by their children. After finishing his mission in Florida, Adam returned to Pinedale. While living at this small ranch home, Jacob and Ann, their declining years were very happy, which the association of their children and many of their grandchildren. They were actively engaged in church work. As they aged, Jacob's dependence on Anne was almost complete. He felt that he couldn't live without her close by his side. Their last great tragedy came in the form of typhoid fever. Hiram contracted this dreadful disease while attending his goats at the Black Rock Ranch. While nursing Hiram and his 3 children, Anne contracted the dreadful disease and soon died, as did her brother Joseph Follett. Uncle Jake, left without his mate, was perfectly indifferent toward life. Soon after her death, he dreamed that he saw her on the opposite side of a large stream of water. As she beckoned him to come, he seemed to have an assurance that he was wanted on the other side. Thus his blessing was fulfilled, which promised that he would remain in life until completely satisfied with life. His death was on the 24th of May, 1909. His body was quietly laid to rest beside his devoted wife in the Safford, Arizona cemetery. In closing this sketch of their lives, we, the surviving members of Jacob and Anne, children and all of their large posterity, humbly join our hearts and spirits with pride and satisfaction as we give thanks to the Father of our spirits for the privilege of being born in this mortal probation through such worthy parentage. We rejoice in the rich heritage which they so generously bequeathed unto us. We bless their names for our strong, fine bodies, for the beautiful characteristics which were inherited from them, and above all, we thank them for their living testimonies of the divinity of the Lord Jesus Christ, and their examples of love and service to God and their fellow men here in life. Jacob Brewer. He was born 21st of June, 1833 at Neversink, Sullivan County, New York, the 3rd son of Louis Brewer and Bithynia Wheaton. He married Sabra Ann Follett, daughter of Joseph Follett and Cynthia Stiles, in 1863. He died 24th of May, 1909 at Safford, Graham County, Arizona, and was buried at Safford. Children: Jacob Albert Brewer, 15th of June, 1865. Joseph Louis Brewer, the 3rd of August, 1867. Charles Frederick Brewer, the 18th of September, 1869. Harriet Louise Brewer, 13th of March, 1872. Adam Rufus Brewer, 21st February, 1874. George Franklin Brewer, 21st of May, 1876. John Hiram Brewer, the 10th of February, 1878. Emma Ann Brewer, the 3rd of April, 1880. William Henry Brewer, 24th of February, 1882. Cynthia Jane Brewer, the 18th of August, 1883. Alice May Brewer, the 11th of March, 1885.